Buddy got me this T-shirt, Southern Rhodesian Commandos.
Nice.
Yeah,
Excellent.
one
Excellent.
of my favorite new shirts. Have you seen what Trump is saying about, speaking of Rhodesia and Southern Africa, about South Africa?
No, I have not. What do you say?
He's just stopped aid to South Africa and looking at all kinds of economic influence to stop the land reform stealing land from farmers, mostly
Right,
white
good.
farmers. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't care what color their skin is. Government stealing stuff from people is a bad thing.
100%. And we already saw how that worked out for Zimbabwe.
Yes. Yes. I believe you and I are both trillionaires thanks to Zimbabwe.
We
Not
most
that we like
certainly
to
are.
brag or
Yeah.
anything. It just, we just throw it out there. It is what it is,
Kind of a big flex.
Us, Elon, Billy. That's what I call Bill Gates. Billy. He doesn't really like it, but what's he gonna do? I'm a trillionaire.
Exactly. We can't stop that.
Can't do anything.
Dr. Gordon Botton is on coin number 1688 up in Ohio. Our good friend Gerald out in Oregon, coin number 952. Don Bothwell, Montana. Giles says, good morning, brothers from the Philippines.
Good morning, guys.
Thanks so much for being on, guys. We got I've been driving for the last 3 days across country. I'm back in the great state of Tennessee now, thank God. But yeah, so got a good show for you. And without too much further ado, if you are interested in checking out the American Warrior Society, please click the links in today's show notes and find out more. We live in some uncertain times, as Will is going to give us the deets on all that uncertainty. And Will Rhodes is on. So, Mr. Will, where do we start, my brother?
Well, we're going to start on a normal spot. The CNN Fear Greed Index is down slightly from this point right now because there's the big T word floating around this morning. I see Gold member is in the house. Good to see you, brother. We just need one more Will, and we have a quorum of Wills. We're going to touch on tariffs at the very end of this. And the reason we're not doing it first is I kind of wanted to see what was going to happen during the show. Right now, the markets are headed down about 2.5%. And I hope nobody had any ripple in their accounts, because last I looked, it was down about 20% this morning. So it's not the place to be.
No.
Yikes. All right, so let's jump in on this Fear Greed Index. We can see it was depressed quite a bit. It was coming back. I think everybody kind of forgot about the whole tariff thing, to be honest. And, I kind of did too, between everything else, the DCA midair and then the Philadelphia air ambulance crash, those things kind of took over the news cycle, right? And then Trump, how do I put this? We all knew the tariffs were coming, and I don't want to say he popped them on us, because it sure wasn't a surprise what his intentions were, but just the news cycle let it drop out of everybody's mind, and it dropped out of mine a little bit too. So
you mentioned the crashes, Will. Of course, for those that don't know, and I think the 10 folks watching us live are all our friends and family as such, and they probably know you're a captain of a commercial airliner. Any inside baseball, anything we need to consider on that?
Here is first off, the guys in the RJ were nailing it. That approach was textbook perfect. They were nailing it. There's some very preliminary things out there. The one thing I want to throw out there is everybody reads these articles. Those helicopters are around DCA all the time. They're everywhere. They're like mosquitoes. And the to have one of those go fairly close to you is not uncommon at all. They have they have the helicopter paths that go through there. The path of that particular helicopter was capped at 200 feet. There's all kinds of conflicting rumors out there. I always give it about a week before I comment on any of those things, or if there's an active killer situation, I give it a week to let some stuff come in. NTSB's done a very preliminary report. Oh, sorry, guys, forgot to silence my phone. The NTSB has given a very preliminary report. Based on that, I'll make this comment. They said that whoever had his hands on the control of the RJ at that moment just before impact had pitched the aircraft up. And I'll be candid, I was hoping they never saw it coming.
Yeah.
Because if that was me, I'd just rather have it be done. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, 1 second before impact, the nose of the aircraft did pitch up, and that
Oh,
means
no.
somebody probably saw something. And that made, when I heard that, it really made me sad, because I was, for their sake, I was hoping it was just they were here and then they weren't.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing I've really seen out there. Um, the that's really about it. Give it another week, and I'll have some more comments probably. It's
What
depending on how
altitude
things
were they when
solidify.
they were the RJ? Do you know
So
at the time of the strike?
they're using ADSB data, which is a transmitted data, not the actual. They haven't broken into the black boxes and nailed down the exact
Okay.
altitude. So there's a little bit of a range. Generically speaking, 325 feet plus or minus 25 feet. So I call it 325. The cap for that helicopter route was 200 feet.
That's close, man.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
even the
Now,
allowable difference is 150 feet. Am I getting that
well,
correct?
but the thing is, it really, it wouldn't be, because how do I explain this succinctly? They wouldn't allow them to pass that close. It would either be the helicopter. They either wouldn't put the aircraft on um that circling approach. So when you go
Mhm.
into one runway and then you go to another one, it's called a circle, even though it's not a full circle around the airport. The If that helicopter had to go through there for some, reason, for a VIP, or, no kidding, I say emergency, but not in the aircraft emergency sense, but this person needs to get somewhere right now, that aircraft wouldn't have been there. Okay. The and this is out there, and this is on the tape, so I'll say this is that the helicopter called the aircraft in sight and was supposed to deviate around it. Now, once a pilot calls another aircraft in sight and the controller says maintain visual separation, that separation is no longer the controller's responsibility
Mhm.
per regulation. So people have been critical of the air traffic controller, and she didn't have any, per the reg, she didn't have any responsibility left at that point.
Yeah.
Now,
So can I
that's,
clarify what you just said
yeah,
to make sure
yeah,
I understood?
sure.
It sounded like you said that they called the AB in the tower called to the Black Hawk and said, you know, visual insight. And
Mhm.
did the Black Hawk acknowledge that they had it in sight?
Actually, the Blackhawk initiated that.
Oh,
The
they did.
Blackhawk
So
said
they said,
we
"I'll
have
do it."
traffic in sight, request visual, and what they
I
mean
got
is we request visual separation,
you. Okay.
and the tower gave that clearance to maintain visual separation. At that point, the Blackhawk should have taken their course further to the east to maintain that separation. They
Because the
he
RJ had the right of way, so to speak, right?
Correct, yes, yep.
Oh,
In that parlance, yes, they had the right of way, and it was up to the Blackhawk to maintain that visual separation, which obviously did not occur. Now, a lot of things can happen there. Personally, I don't call traffic in sight at night, because when you're, especially if you're higher or at the same altitude as that traffic, aircraft lights can blend into a city lightscape like that in a heartbeat. So,
mhm.
um, requesting visual separation on that is usually a way to keep traffic flowing. Um, and there's definitely time and a place to do it. Um, is nighttime like that a time and a place to do it? Sure, it can be.
Mm.
Unfortunately, it didn't work out this one.
So, Guile is getting to the heart of it. So, are you at this point? I know it's early. Are you
Mhm.
saying that it appears to be the Black Hawk era?
At this point, it looks that way. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll put it this way. I'll put it, the definitive statement I can give is it sure isn't the RJ's fault.
Hmm.
Now,
Michael
yeah.
is also a pilot. Michael says, "Did the tower confirm direction and altitude of the identification to make certain it was the right visual?"
No, and they are not required to.
Mm,
They will point out where the aircraft is. And I guess maybe I misread your statement. So if this is where you're going, Michael, then yes, they pointed out where the aircraft was and what it was doing, and um, the Black Hawk confirmed that
mhm.
they saw the aircraft. So um,
Tony says, "What about the anti-collision alerts?" As I
mm,
understand it, they didn't hit until like a second or two before the impact.
correct. Below 1,000 feet, and this is industry wide. This isn't one airline or aircraft or another. You have a system called TCAS, terrain avoidance collision alert system. and it will tell you to climb or descend to avoid hitting another aircraft. It's one of my favorites because it keeps me alive if something goes sideways. That system, first you'll get a traffic alert when you're a certain time away from impacting another airplane, and then you'll get that's a TA, a traffic alert, and then you'll get an RA, which is a resolution advisor, where the airplane will actually tell you what to do. It'll say climb or descend or basically maintain altitude without getting too far into the weeds on it. They never got one of those because below 1,000 feet above the ground, all you get is a traffic alert. And the reason for that, because I'm sure somebody's thinking, well, wouldn't you still want to avoid the aircraft? The reason for that is below 1,000 feet, if it tells you to descend, it could descend you into the ground.
Right.
So it's a limitation within the system, and you could end up with conflicting advisories from the aircraft, because let's say you did get a resolution advisory where the airplane tells you what to do below 1,000 feet, and that resolution advisory was to descend. Well, now as you start approaching the ground too quickly, you'll get a ground proximity warning system that will tell you to climb. And it goes back into the conflict with the aircraft. So therefore, you get a traffic alert to alert you somebody's nearby, and that's it. And we can see the other aircraft on the TCAS system. We can see where they are and what their altitude is relative to my aircraft.
And I don't think military aircraft have black boxes per se, the way the commercial aircraft do. Do they, Will?
I am not entirely certain about that. I don't know.
I don't think they do. And, it's one of those things, will we ever know? Were they operating under nods? What was the conditions,
The NTSB actually touched on the nods thing. We may get some clues. If the nods were not in use, they could be in the bags in the cockpit.
Good point.
So if they find them in the wreckage in the bags, or now whether they're up on the helmet or not, yeah. So if they're on the helmet, of course, between the impact with the other aircraft and the impact with the water, it could move on the helmet, of course. So that it's amazing what the NTSB can get out of wreckage. It really is.
And Dr. Bodson says everyone wants flying cars, including me, Dr. Bodson, and I don't need to be anywhere near a flying car. Will might be able to handle it, but I don't think so.
Yeah. So it's a tragic event. It's the first major fatality in U.S. airlines since 2009. So, yeah.
Well, can I ask you one final question? I don't mean to cut you off, but this is something that I think you and I talked about. I'm more scared of that airport, and always have been, than just about anything. And maybe that goes back to being a kid and watching them pulling people out of the Potomac back in the day. But, my son flew out of that airport last week, and I was like, when Grant flies anywhere, I don't worry about it. It's incredibly safe, with the exception of there at the airport. Does that airport bother you the way it's set up, or are there other airports that bother you more? What can you tell us on that?
They all bother me because I want to retire. No, in all seriousness, actually, I like the airport.
Really?
But it's also my typical type A pilot personality. I enjoy the challenge of it, because I'll be candid, and I'm sorry if this comes across as arrogant in some way. It's not the way I mean it. I'm kind of bored at work. You fly A to B. I've been doing it for 40 something years, flying airplanes. It's kind of boring. So a little bit of a challenge.
Out of there, do you let your first officer do it, or you do it, or no?
Sure. Absolutely. It's the way it works in the industry is we take turns. It's just like kindergarten. And some would argue pilots are just overgrown kindergartners with our toys anyway. And they may not be wrong, but we take turns. So captain will fly a leg, first officer flies a leg, back and forth. In a lot of ways, especially if we're going someplace very challenging, I'd rather have the first officer fly it, because that lets me sit back and not be consumed with the minutia of actually flying the airplane. I can sit back and keep the big picture in mind. And that's it helps me with me keeping the bigger picture. It helps safety, and that is, at the end of the day, that's the job.
Amen.
So
I won't get into DEI and all the other stuff. So I think that's too hot button for right now, unless you want to tiptoe into that minefield at this point.
I'll just say anybody can do the job.
Mhm.
I just want the best people doing the job.
Bingo.
I don't care if it's when I go to the doctor or dentist or get on an
Firemen,
airplane, or I don't care.
teachers.
Just hire the best people. Period.
Amen.
That's it.
Back to the fear and greed index. Thank you so much for that
Yeah.
breakdown, Will.
Yeah, no problem. Made it all up, just so you know. So right now today, I'm guessing we're gonna go more towards fear. I'll be honest with you guys. This tariff thing, I think it's just a blurb. If you haven't read The Art of the Deal, read it. I was just talking with my parents over the weekend, and they had not read it. I'm like, if you want to understand how the man thinks, read The Art of the Deal. You may not want to give him money by buying a book. Go get it from the library or whatever. It's a Trump book. He's great. He's awesome. It's Trump, right? But he lays out in his book, and I learned from the book from a business standpoint, negotiating. He said, the more you want something, the more ridiculous you make your first offer. So this is kind of a first offer, right? So we're going to slap this tariff on you. What are you going to do?
I'm literally getting it right now on Audible.
Okay. Yep. It is. You will understand how the man thinks a lot more. And
got it.
And a lot of the criticisms of Trump are legitimate. You know, he's a carnival barker. Everything he does is always the greatest and the biggest and all this stuff. But he pushes people to do things with his actions, right? Mm-hmm. So now he's pushing the Canadians, Mexicans, the Chinese to a lesser extent to do something, right? Mm-hmm. And he has a bigger goal in mind, agree or disagree with it. So this is I think this is the opening shot to get Canada and Mexico to renegotiate the I forget the name of it now. It was the new NAFTA when Trump was in office the first time. Mm-hmm. It's just the opening. This is the shot across the bow. You know, we're gonna throw this tariff on you. You know, let's renegotiate this, and it could be gone in, you know, a week. It could be gone in 90 days. It could take a year to renegotiate this. We're going to dig deeper into the tariffs right at the end of the show, along with a business acquaintance anecdote about it.
You know, I look at this as, you know, this is warfighting 101 or jujitsu, whatever. I put you in a position of positional dominance before I go for my submission. Mm-hmm. And I think right now he recognizes the American economy is, I have a ready-made positional dominance.
Yeah.
I exert this tariff and I slowly ratchet it like an anaconda until I get what I want.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. Do you?
No, I really don't. Now, is it going to cause some short-term pain? Yeah, it is. Prices are going to change. There's going to be some uncertainty. You know, we talked about it after the election. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, because he's going to push. And as we've seen with everything he's done with, you know, Doge, the FBI, me and Dr. Fuller were talking about that, you know, via text. He's making a lot of FBI people uncomfortable right now with some of his actions, right? And I imagine that's happening throughout the government complex. But will this force people to up their game? Probably.
Yeah, and a lot of those, you know, and I speak for my friends. I don't speak for them, but I'm in constant contact with all my friends that are still in government. And a lot of them are like, man, I voted for the guy. Now I'm feeling the pain. Yeah. And I hope that the president will remember that the government is not this monolithic bureaucracy that is out to get him and his family.
Yeah,
there is a large section that are diehard Trump acolytes, and they support him in his decisions, and that he won't just paint everybody with a brush just because they have a fingerprint on a January 6er, because January 6th had their day at court. I mean, they had a jury of their peers. They had judges appointed by all sides of the aisle, and the chips fell where they may. I think that I would have hoped he would have been more surgical with removing some SESs and some very senior folks, and then let the cream rise to the top. But if you're going all the way down and stomping out people in local field offices that signed off on an arrest warrant for a January 6er, I don't know where this ends if you do that.
Yep. And will I say he's gone too far? If he hasn't gone a little too far, he's right up on the line.
Yeah.
And and I know you will agree with me on this. Just because his name's Trump and I voted for him 3 times doesn't mean I'm going to rubber stamp approve and get on the bandwagon for any little thing he does.
100%.
Because that's not our job as Americans, left or right.
Correct.
So,
Ted,
all
as
right,
long as this change is stressful, and he's no doubt. And I think in some regard, you're going to have to swing maybe a little bit over the line sometimes just to right the ship because it's so far out in left field.
And the other thing I'll throw out there on with Trump's actions is some of this is being done to start a court battle. Because, like, let's take birthright citizenship as an example. It's the constitutional amendment. He can't undo that. But what it's going to do is it's going to put it into the court system, and then a decision will be made. So that's where I think some of this is doing. I think some of this stuff, somebody advising him at some point is probably like, yeah, you can't, that's not going to hold up. And I'm wondering if they're like, we don't care if it doesn't hold up. It's going to start the discussion. It's going to start the court battle. Because if somebody doesn't start somewhere, it's never going to happen.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I remember there was a whole lot of people that told me I would never be an officer. Like, nah, you got out of the Marine Corps for 3 years. The Marine Corps hates that. You got in trouble. You got busted. You this and that. I didn't have a college degree at the time. Like, there's no way they're going to make you an officer. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to let them tell me no.
Yeah.
And I'm going to submit the paperwork. And guess what? I got approved over everybody. Yeah. So it's just, I agree with it. Let's take it to the courts. Maybe they say no. Okay. No harm, no foul.
Right. Exactly. So I see Dr. Fuller is in the house. Yeah, and let's just pretend I need these glasses here. Let's see here. Yeah, what's Will Parker say there?
Says Andrew Bronco.
The next one further up above TC's.
Yeah, far too many Americans are mentally and physically weak to deserve a president as strong as President Trump. It would be nice if they would hold and trust him enough to see the bigger picture. I don't know that I trust anybody to that regard, not even myself, because I know I can go too far.
Well, I disagree with you only because I'm right there with you, and I never go too far.
You're right.
So, all right. So if we dig back into this, thanks, Dr. Fuller. Worked on the hair extra special just for you.
Absolutely.
After seeing some of your Facebook posts with your dapper attire. So
I don't know how he does that beard. I mean, it's so luxurious.
It is. It truly is. I make a point of not showing those pictures to my wife.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little scary what could happen there. It's bad enough she's got a picture of Rich Brown on her nightstand instead of me. I don't need Rich Brown and TC Fuller on her nightstand. So this one, I found this one interesting, guys, because there's a game within the game, right? So there's this Russian spy ship. It was in British waters, preparing the ground for war, as the Telegraph says. So the Yantar is known to carry 2 submersibles. They can dive down to 6,000 meters, which is a long ways underwater, in my opinion. Allowing the crew to map, monitor, and potentially sever undersea cables that transmit data around the world. You want to bring a country to a screeching halt? There you go. So we're going to dig a little bit into what this ship has been doing, but it's interesting, the stuff that we get consumed with, Trump and tariffs and everything else in the news cycle, right? Mm-hmm. So we're going to dig into this a little bit more. Let's jump back up to Giles' comment though, because that's one. Guile is not from the U.S. He says, "Can Trump really change the Constitution?" No, he cannot.
Yep.
That has to go through an amendment process through either a convention of states or through Congress, and a 3/4 vote in Congress.
2/3 and then 3/4.
2/3 in Congress. So trying to get 2/3 of politicians, a lot of people are going to have to cross the aisle, so to speak. That's not going to happen. So I think the only pathway to get rid of birthright citizenship is going to be for the Supreme Court to handle it. So
is that really? I need to go back and watch that Bronco show because to me, the way that it's written in the 14th Amendment is so thin. Mm-hmm. It could almost be interpreted. It's not as definitive as we might think it is.
And I have not. I read it when the whole discussion came up. I read the text of it, and we know what it was intended for. But yet again, unintended consequences and politicians, as much better as they were back in the day, still did not, dot all the I's and cross all the T's and close the loopholes. So humans are humans.
And to Kyle's comment, how about removal of birthrights? I think it really comes back to what TC said. He's starting the conversation, and there are so many at the grassroots level that that will lockstep move in that direction, that it could generate steam at some point. But right now, the DNC is they're still in lockstep with each other. I mean, Hegseth's vote proved that. Kash Patel and Tulsi and all the other votes left to be confirmed will be strong.
Yep, for sure.
But on this point here about Russia now,
yeah,
we're talking about, okay, they start cutting undersea cables. Is that really like as big as we want to make it out to be, or satellites carry the load if they did cut undersea cables?
I'm sure that I'm guessing it's a division of labor, if you will, right? So there's obviously something going along these cables because everybody cares about them. So would it hinder things? Yes. Would it bring everything to an absolute screeching halt? Probably not, because there are satellites. But and I'm completely making this up off the top of my head, but perhaps banking access, you and me accessing our online banking records would, fall further down the priority list than, say, businesses being accessed their merchant accounts that allow them to run credit cards, right?
Good point. Yeah.
So if it carries any significant portion, let's just say it carries, I'll make up a number, 30%. Well, could that be transferred over satellites? I'm sure it could. Will it take time? Will it cause disruptions? Of course. And then, what's it take to get that fixed? I have no idea. It's more than 10 feet underwater, and therefore I don't go there.
No kidding.
So, and this map is just simply showing where it's been. I did find a couple of things interesting on here. Back in 2015, this ship was gathering intelligence on our acoustic sensors off the coast of Georgia. And then number 6 there on the map, November of 2024, mapping UK undersea cables. And then a second sortie into UK waters after it was escorted away in January, just last month here. So it got escorted away. I'm sure that was a tense moment.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
So, we're seeing this habit of this, and in this article, I don't think I have it in here, but basically the Russians built a fleet of these fishing trawlers that are actually intelligence gathering ships. And this goes back to the Cold War stuff, right?
Well, and this is why Trump wants Greenland, because they're opening all these bases along their northern boundary now that the sea ice is, melting away.
So I did read one thing on the Greenland thing, and I'm not really up on it. I just took it as another Trump opening salvo for some sort of negotiation. So I didn't really give it too much of my brain power, but I did see a map and there's, I don't know, the area, I guess I'll call it, between Greenland and Canada. And if I remember right, that is actually a waterway. There's some water there, and obviously it's frozen. But the argument I read, and I have no idea if this is true or not, but if global warming, with air quotes, continues and the polar ice cap melts, finally, since I started hearing about it in the 70s, that will become a Panama Canal 2.0.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting. It's like, well, political left, do you believe in global warming? Yes. Well, then this is going to be a very strategic waterway, so therefore we should have it. We should have access to this. We should fight to have access to this and control of this, which is what Trump's doing. So now take your pick.
All right.
You got to pick one: global warming or Trump. Because if you're right about global warming, then you should be back into what Trump is doing.
100%.
So it'll be an interesting see if they can take that argument and change it into a catch-22 for the left.
I love Tony's comment here. This is typical Marine Southerner think, and it's so simple. It's beautiful. It's elegant. If my neighbor's cow breaks through my fence and births a calf, neither the calf nor the cow become mine. And
Yep.
it's as simple as that. So maybe the 14th Amendment does need to be changed. I think we're the only developed nation, maybe the only nation, period, that has birthright citizenship.
I believe we're the only one. I haven't done a lot of research on it, but I believe that is the case. Not only that, but if you want to immigrate to even Canada, you have to show you're going to contribute to the economy.
100%.
And
As
I
it
mean,
should be.
you have to, and you have to show it. You can't just show up and I understand it's a long process, so I'm very much paraphrasing that down. You can't just show up, take a test, and become a citizen.
Mm-mm.
And I loved who was it? JD Vance was being interviewed, and the CNN reporter says, "Well, we're a country of immigrants," and so on and so forth. He says, "Well, just because we started that way does not mean we need to continue that way."
But what's that? That's
my
not even
point.
true. We're I mean, my family were not immigrants. They were settlers. They were just moving
Mhm.
from like Wisconsin to Michigan. They were moving from one British territory to another. One just happened to be across an ocean, but it was still a British territory. They had the same coins in their pockets, and the same judicial system was in play.
Mhm.
So that's not necessarily true. Now, some of the other folks may be immigrants. God,
Mhm.
good on you. But some of us were settlers.
Right. And we also have to look at, if we think of the Ellis Island days, the early 1900s, late 1800s, whatever that time period was, there was also a need for that excess. We needed that labor. We needed the people to
Amen.
grow the country. And of course, there's the argument made, we still need that, but we don't need the blanket, just anybody, right? Because back then you could bring in an uneducated, barely literate in English, if literate at all, immigrant and teach them how to turn a wrench in a factory, and they contribute to the economy. That's not what's necessarily happening now, right?
No, but see, that's
So,
another thing. Our immigration policies were very restrictive to Western European countries and some Eastern European countries. It wasn't like the idea that we'll take your unwashed masses is
mhm.
crap. I mean, if you were coming from Hungary, if you were coming from Italy, we'll take you. But if you're coming from Ghana or Trinidad and Tobago, maybe you wait in line a little bit longer.
Yeah. So,
TC says, Will, I love the fact that you still believe that politicians are constrained by logic. It's so hopeful. Ted
well,
reminds us,
they may not use the same logic we use. It may have to do with campaign contributions, but there's still a logic there.
Ted says Northwest Passage is a mega big deal, keeping China out of the Arctic. Yeah, I mean, go back to the early 1800s, the Terror
Mhm.
and the Erebus, that whole story of trying to map the Northwest Passage. I mean, it's just an incredible, incredible story. And here we are with it
Yep.
really happening. And man, it's going to be worth a lot.
Yep. Sure is. So, all right, let's dig back into this Russian trawler a little bit here. Again, just pretending I need these glasses because I'm no way old enough to need glasses like this.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. You sounded like one of my kids just then. So the Soviets built up this huge fishing fleet in the 70s, and then converted a lot of them to spy ships. Um, the I found this bottom part interesting. U.S. Destroyer approached the Soviet vessel lurking off the coast of Virginia in 1964. So the ship's been doing this for a while, and they said they spun on the dime, and said it looks like a godforsaken piece of junk, but manned by a talented crew. So the old wolf in sheep's clothing, right? So my whole point of this is there's still these games going on in and about everything, and we can't just get consumed by the news cycle, which I did. This when I read this article, I was really surprised by this. I mean, if you would ask me, hey, do you think there's games going on the ocean? I said yes, but no idea that it's happening as actively as it appears to be.
Yeah.
All right. So into the economics of stuff. So this one is I found this chart interesting here. So this is from the Federal Reserve. This is the net percentage of domestic banks tightening standards for commercial industrial loans to large and middle market firms. All right. So what this is large and middle market firms. This is larger companies. So the and tightening standards means tightening lending standards. In other words, it's getting harder for these firms to get a loan or easier based on where we are in this chart. This chart goes back to about 1994. And what I want you to notice here is the red lines going up. This is when it's getting harder for these firms to get a loan. So banks tighten standards, makes it harder for these companies to get loans. Now, is it the chicken or the egg, right? The banks see that companies are getting themselves overextended, so therefore they're getting into a bad spot. The banks react to that by tightening standards because the bank doesn't want to get overextended, and then the recession occurs. It's kind of goes together, right? But it's the business cycle, right? You get some irrational exuberance, and then you come back to reality. But what you will notice is the pattern of lending standards tighten. Then there's a recession, which is the vertical gray bar, where I put the red horizontal line there. And then through the recession and afterwards, standards loosen because we get rid of the bad actors out there, right? So then banks start getting optimistic again, and then they loosen standards as the economy is recovering, and then the cycle starts again. What I found interesting was the far right of this chart, Rich, where I put a black X through COVID because you just got to put an asterisk by anything with that, right?
Right.
But what I found interesting is this one where we just recently experienced where you and I on shows talked about how banks were tightening lending standards, but we never officially had a recession. Yeah, we had 2 quarters of negative economic growth, which is your technical recession. And then they changed the definition so they didn't have to call it one under Biden.
But there should have been one, right?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
But and the NBER gets to make that call, not numbers on a piece of paper. Now they can come back, a year or 2 years later, once all the numbers are finalized, and go, yeah, by the way, there was a recession back there.
In NBER, that's executive branch?
National Board of Economic, it sure ain't reality. I forget what the R is for. I'm sure they're under the executive branch.
Oh, there you go.
So I'm sure it's just a coincidence. So standards tightened there in 22, 23, and now they're easing. So the question mark there is, did we have a recession? And if so, why did it not really feel like one? And I will argue that the reason it didn't feel like a recession, even though the private economy felt like a recession, the reason we still had good GDP numbers was deficit spending from the federal government. Very generically speaking, GDP ran at about a 2.5% annual growth rate through that time. There was a period of time in there where the federal deficit was 6% of GDP.
Jeez.
So you take out that 6% off 2.5%, you've got a big time shrinking economy. What they were able to do, they were able to pump enough money out there through stimulus projects, through infrastructure projects, then to keep that number up. Does that make sense?
Oh, of course it does. But like Tony says, I'm still feeling it,
Oh, yeah.
Data may not show it, but I think the average American definitely felt that recession, whether they want to call it
for sure.
or not. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So, yeah. And so the reason I'm saying this or bringing this up is if we actually are seeing banks loosen lending standards like this, that means money's going to start flowing again. And that money starts flowing again. Is the economy going to take off even more? Maybe. Wait and see. Okay. But then to Tony's point, not saying Tony's getting this spot, just saying that the squeeze we all felt, right?
Right.
So this is from the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia. This isn't from, right wing, we love Trump, hate Biden.com, right? So this is talking about credit card balances and mortgages. You want to read this one off to us, brother?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, when you ask me to, my computer decides to do something weird.
See how my timing's getting better like that?
It's crazy.
I've been working.
I've got half of Google just covered up the screen. Hold on. Let me see if I can clear that. I can't say that. Okay, here we go. Card balances and delinquencies continue upward trajectory. Mortgage originations stagnate. Credit card performance is showing signs of consumer stress. The share of active credit card accounts making just a minimum payment hit a 12-year high. The share of revolving card balances to total card balances is continuing to rise since the end of the pandemic. The share of delinquent balances continues to worsen year over year after surpassing pre-pandemic levels in third quarter 2023. And this is something you and I have talked about damn near weekly for
Yeah.
5 years. It just keeps
Mhm.
getting where's the end state? I mean, if we're on this trajectory, brother, where does it go?
The end states when people can no longer service the minimum payment on their cards.
Well, they can just print money like the government can, can't they?
Well, no,
Oh, okay. But
sorry. Uh, we'll cover that on the next show. They can't do that. The Treasury Department Secret Service kind of frowned upon that
Mhm.
apparently. But the point is, this is like I say, we've talked about this a lot, and the trajectory is just continuing on this. And this is where, are we going to start seeing some reality hit now? Now that Trump's, pulling back the reins on all this government spending, could that drive people into defaulting on their cards? And the just looking at the political landscape, will that turn people against Trump? Because under Biden, I can make this work. Under Trump, I can't.
Mhm.
Well, and there's a lot of supposing going on in what I'm about ready to say. But if those people were able to make it on their own, with the government helping them, were they really making it on their own? And why should the rest of us take on national debt to make that happen? Right. So
100%.
it's no different than when you and I got ourselves in the debt in our 20s. At some point, you got to suck up the pain and handle the problem. Right.
Yeah.
And as I am fond of telling people our age, if we get into discussions about this, is it's our turn to be the grown-ups.
Yeah.
So
The only problem is Gen X is like the smallest demographic out there.
yes.
And it's like, how much weight can we take to pay for
Yep.
the boomer party?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I just what was that movie? It wasn't it was the one where they were in detention in the school in the 80s.
Breakfast Club.
Thank you. There was a picture of the 4 actors from that, just stare at the camera with that teenage insolent look on their face and said, for every boomer frustrated by millennials, for every millennial thinks boomers are stupid, there's a generation between that hates both of you.
That's right. Amen. I can't understand either one of them. That's right.
Yeah. So it's an interesting study. So
it is. Tony says, what happened to the move to make banks hold more cash in reserve?
They are. They are holding more in reserve. However,
What relative number are we talking about?
gosh, I think Tony knows this number. I want to say they had to go from 2 to 3.5%, 2% to 3.5%. Well, that's a lot of money when you're talking about, say, a JP Morgan or a Citi. That's a whole lot more money they have to hold in reserve there.
Yeah, but a local bank here in Cumberland County, Tennessee, that's not much money.
Yeah. So, I mean, you might be talking about, if you got a bank pushing 100 million, you're looking at, a couple $1 million more. They have
And
to
why
hold
does
in
a
reserve.
GSIB need to save any money? They're just going to get
Well,
cash.
but it's regulatory. So so now to your point, why do they have to? Because they're going to get bailed out. They don't have to, but the regulation requires them to, which is why Jamie Dimon was out arguing against this for quite a bit. So,
Okay.
Yep.
Can you read this one?
Yeah, it says Dr. Fuller says. Actually, I want to go back to our Dr. Fuller's comment. Gen X doesn't have a lot of F's to give. Matter of fact, I took the F off my keyboard. That's how few I have to give.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
All right.
In response to weaker credit performance, banks are adopting more conservative lending standards. Tighter bank underwriting is resulting in a measurable decline in new card origination commitments and higher origination credit quality. Seen in rising original credit scores, card balances increased to new series high, but year over year, card growth slowed to a near 3-year low. So am I understanding this correctly? That the size of the pool of people using credit cards is shrinking, but the amount of usage is increasing?
So let's dig into it here. So the tighter and the one there is a footnote. If you Google this up, guys, you can come right to this. Isn't any secret thing. You can find all this stuff on the Federal Reserve's website. So tighter bank underwriting. So this is standard, if you will. So the of X, say you have a credit score of 600 to get a particular card, now maybe it's 650. So they're tightening that underwriting, okay, is resulting in a measurable decline in new card origination commitments. In other words, they're giving out fewer new cards, okay, and higher origination credit quality. So again, we're going from that, not only the credit score, but also your income to debt level, okay.
Is that what
And
they mean by credit quality? Will, is that what you're saying?
correct. The credit quality is more the overall picture, not just your credit score.
Okay.
Okay. Because somebody could have a really great credit score and be hanging on by their fingernails. The bank figures out if they're hanging on by their fingernails by looking at their total debt service cost per month compared to their monthly income. Okay. Seen in rising original credit scores. So again, credit scores are a piece of that and they're going up. Card balances increased to a new series high. So this means the credit card balances are up. The series high is something to look for, Rich. The series in this case just means since the records were kept for that particular thing we're talking about. So in this case, card balances. So let's just say I'm making up the number, guys. Let's say they started tracking this in 1994. This would mean it's the highest since 1994. So when you look at some of these numbers that are computed for different things, all time might only go back to 2017.
Good point.
Because that's when they started tracking that particular metric. Okay. So when they say series, that's what they're talking about. Okay. Year over year. So that would be in this case now February 2025 compared to February 2024. Year over year card growth slowed. So in other words, people are slowing down what they're putting on their cards to a 3-year low. That tells me people are either A, hitting their max on their credit card, or B, they're realizing they can't service this and they're constraining themselves. Now, Americans aren't real good at constraining themselves. So that tells me more of them are probably hitting their maxes and they can't do it, which then takes us back to our age-old discussion about buy now, pay later, and how so much of that is being used for groceries and the daily needs of living, like clothing, at places like Walmart. And that is not on your credit score yet.
Right.
So this all dovetails together.
Interesting. I'll go ahead and read this one. First lien mortgage origination activity remains at a series low in a high rate environment. Banks averaged $55 billion in mortgage originations per quarter in the first 3 quarters of 2024, after originating $219 billion at the peak of originations in third quarter 2021. With high interest rates, consumers with low rate mortgages have less financial incentives to refinance, dampening new mortgage demand. Existing mortgages are performing well as delinquency rates remain low. That sounds like okay. Am I learning anything new there? That doesn't sound like I'm surprised at any of that.
And none of it's really surprising. It's just the ongoing move of it. If you bring that one back up, brother, there's a couple of points I do want to hit though. First lien mortgage origination. So the first lien would be your primary mortgage. You're not taking out a home equity line or a second mortgage to buy something else. So this is first lien mortgage origination. So it means starting the new first lien mortgage. This would be buying a new home. Okay. So basically what it's saying is buying a new home activity remains at a series low. So again, series is however long this number has been tracked, which they don't tell us. High rate environment. Obviously we know we have higher rates right now. So let's look at the numbers though. So banks average $55 billion in mortgage originations per quarter in the first 3 quarters of 2024, after originating basically 4 times that at the peak in third quarter of 2021. So they went from doing $219 billion in mortgage originations in the first 3 quarters of 2021 to 3 years later only doing $55 billion. Now, I don't know about your business, Rich, but if my business goes down by about 62%, I'm going to notice.
Yeah.
Okay. That will probably perk my ears up and make me go, I need to do something here. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what's happened to mortgage originations, right? So obviously we know about the high interest rates, high mortgage rates right now.
But there's a whole lot of things contributing to that. And that's, I think,
Absolutely.
what you're speaking to right now.
Yeah. And so, part of it is like, am I going to go out and refinance my house right now? No, I'm at 275.
Yeah, why would you?
No way. It'd be silly to. So that also tells me anybody who is doing that really has to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, as you know, I follow the Florida market closely, and it is just continuing its slow falling apart. And now with return to office, there's people who are really getting squeezed because they're having to sell in Florida because they went there for, you know, the better COVID policies and weather and all those things. And now they're getting called back to the office and they're putting their houses on the market and they're finding out it's a whole different market down there.
Yeah.
So, let's see here. Existing mortgages are performing well as delinquency rates remain low. Well, a lot of those are like mine, 275, 3, 3.25, whatever they might be. People can manage that. But it's not the case for newer mortgages. Those people are paying through the nose unless you're in the market for a new home, in which case a lot of the home builders are now they're actually permanently buying down your rate, Rich. Remember when we talked a while back, they would buy down they would do a 3-2-1 buy down where they would take 3 points off the interest rate the first year, 2 the second, and 1 the third. And by the fourth year, the homeowner was paying whatever the market rate was, call it 7%. Now they're doing permanent buy downs on the mortgage rate where they will say for the entire 30 years, we will buy your rate down from 7% to 3.5%. And it's costing the home builder about $50,000 to $60,000 to essentially they're prepaying your interest with the bank to buy that rate down. That's not the sign of a healthy market.
No.
So, and we're seeing this show up. If you do some YouTube searches for like Florida housing market, new housing market, stuff like that, I'm seeing all kinds of stuff down there. Same things happen in Austin, your area, Nashville, seeing some of the same, not as much, but it's seeing the same trend. The areas where we are not seeing that, Northeast and Midwest, very constrained supply there. And I think that will continue. To put this in perspective, when you look at a housing market, you look at months of supply of homes on the market. So you take your number of homes on the market and make the math easy here. Say you got 300 homes on the market and 30 homes sold in the last month. That would be a 10-month supply, right? There's areas of Florida right now, like Southwest Florida, where you're looking at over a year of supply. 6 months is considered balanced.
A year of supply.
Yep. Whereas up here up in Wisconsin, we're looking at about 3 months of supply right now. Same thing in the Northeast.
That sounds healthy.
It's good for sellers.
Yeah.
For sure. And the rental market's tight up here too. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out here. But people are definitely getting squeezed by this stuff. And when you slow down new mortgages, you slow down everything that goes with buying a new home as well. New furniture, new appliances, all those things. And that eventually translates back into jobs. And then, of course, construction jobs too.
Yeah.
So what's Dr. Fuller have to say there before we move on?
He said that impact is very real. My wife and I will not even consider selling our house, pulling out a ton of money in equity and upgrading because we would have to go from 2.25 to nearly 7%. Yeah, man. I remember.
Absolutely.
I was happy to get a 7.25% loan back in the 90s.
Yeah. And and cheap and expensive is relative, right?
Yeah. That fixed rate at 7 point whatever it was back in the 90s.
Yep.
But now here we are again.
Absolutely. So, all right. So this dovetails into our credit card discussion here. All right. So the blue line here is advance retail sales, and the percent. Both these lines are a percent change from a year ago. So you can see retail sales. Let's just look for, say, from 2022 to 2024. Went down. Now retail sales are starting to creep back up. Now, bear in mind, this is not an inflation-adjusted number. So if inflation goes up 10%, retail sales should go up basically 10%. Okay. The red line is average hourly earnings of production and supervisory employees. So this would be basically your hourly workers. Okay. So this people are not salaried, and non-supervisory, so they're not in management positions. Okay, so this would be your regular folks, right?
Mhm.
What's happened to their wages since about 2022? There, Rich, the red line.
Oof,
Yeah.
oof.
Yep. And now bear in mind that is not inflation adjusted. So that's regular dollars going down. So their purchasing power has plummeted since 2022. Well, what happened since 2022? Stimmy went away, right?
Mhm.
So as prices are coming up, and then credit cards are going up too. Yeah. So this will come together and it will be bad.
I tell
It
you,
is
and
what it
you
is.
want to see bad, man. I just was in Albuquerque moving my son home.
Mhm.
Go along Central Avenue, and I'm not. This is no hyperbole. I've spent a lot of time in my young adult life in conflict zones and third world countries. It was as third world as anything I've seen anywhere. The entire length of Central Avenue, I saw people having sex on the street in broad daylight, on the ground with a blanket over them, just having their way at each other. Hypodemic people smoking crack from glass vials. A guy walking down the street sharpening a machete on the ground like he's in Rwanda. I mean, it was burning fires everywhere, tents. I mean, I've never seen anything like it in America. And this is a major U.S. city, Albuquerque, for the length of probably 10 or 12 miles down Central Avenue. So, I mean, as these indicators go, and they're only kind of going in one direction, and the split widens,
Mhm.
I think we'll see. Because this is 3 or 4 years that I've seen it every few months. I go out there and it just is worse and worse and worse and
Mhm.
worse. Like, where's the bottom at?
Yeah. Well, sadly, I think you and I are going to live through the bottom, and so are our
Mhm.
children.
Yeah.
And it it's going to be bad. I mean, because I think for the first time, and this is kind of off the top of my head, I think this may be the first time where we're going to see this confluence of things. Right?
Mhm, mhm.
We've obviously never had national debt this high. With interest rates where they are now, we've had higher in the past, but debt levels all around were a lot lower then. So it's a higher debt load at a higher rate. And now we're adding in all these societal things, right? We've always had Skid Row. I mean, that goes back as far as humans go back, right? But it wasn't, if somebody was on Skid Row, if Uncle Joe was on Skid Row, you didn't talk about it, right?
Right.
But now it's, society's, oh, we have to, help those people. Or society used to say, that guy needs to get off his butt and get a job and clean his act up,
Mhm.
and now the overall societal take on it is completely different.
If you allow me to take this anecdotal thing, being Albuquerque, just one step further. So we rented from a U-Haul, and the woman in there, I saw on her desk over there, she had a "Make America Great Again," and she's probably maybe 60 years old, and she's got a sweatshirt that says "Lions over sheep." So
Mhm.
I'm kind of thinking she might be a member of my tribe, and she's
Yeah,
got
sure. Yep.
some gun stuff that I can see around the room. So she's like, yeah, luckily the truck you want isn't one they tried to steal. Last night they were out here with a grinder trying to grind one of the trailers apart or something. And
Hmm.
I said, yeah, too bad you can't shoot them. She's like, oh, I did shoot at him. Uh, and I'm like, oh, last night? She's like, no, a couple of years ago. I said, you hit anybody? She's like, no, I missed. They came in, they didn't write me up, but they took my gun away. It took me 2.5 years to get it back. She's
Hmm.
like, I've lived here my whole life, and I can't believe where it's at now. And she was kind of
Yeah.
musing about where there's the bottom as well. She's like, I'm too old to leave. It's like,
Yep.
oof.
Yep. And that person, let's think about the I'm no psychologist, but I'm trying to suppose how I would feel there. If I felt trapped in that situation, I'm trying to run this business and people are coming in trying to steal my equipment, how I support my family. I'd probably be walking around fairly pissed off all the time.
And she she did.
Yeah. And who can blame her, right? And is society doing anything to fix this? No. They take her property away and she has to wait 2.5 years to get it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
And
is
legal fees and everything else. I mean, luckily she didn't get charged for shooting at people trying to steal her stuff, but at
right.
the same time, like, man.
Yeah. And again, And I understand the law. I've watched Andrew Branca's stuff. I've read the book. You can't can't use deadly force to protect personal property unless you're in Texas. And I get that. I understand the law as far as that goes. But at some point, people just get fed up too. And then the system chews them up. You know, the process is the punishment, right? And they could have easily used that with her, right?
Well, remember what the governor did of New Mexico? She said you couldn't carry a gun in Albuquerque.
Yep.
And
I do remember that. And I mentioned, yes.
And guess what I did? I carried a gun in Albuquerque. I'm like, I don't care. I'll be the test case, man. You think I'm going to be disarmed?
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yep. Well, and so, you know, society will be like, oh, you broke the rules. Well, I'm breaking the rules because those people break the rules.
Amen, brother.
You know,
you think the guy walking down the street heading toward me, look, we're driving and he's just walking down the center of the street, sharpening his machete, looking at me. Is he playing by the rules? No.
And has zero intention to play by the rules. Ever.
It's insane.
It is. And it's going to come to a head at some point. And I would say probably the next 5-6 years, it's going to be a slow motion train wreck. Yeah. And unfortunately, we got a lot of slow motion train wrecks going on, whereas in the past we didn't have so many. You know, let's look at New York City in the 70s. I still have pictures somewhere on my computer of all the graffiti and everything. Well, we're headed back to there, right? With Denny. What was his first name? What is his first name? The guy who choked out the guy in New York City on the subway, and
Daniel Penny.
Daniel Penny. Sorry. You know, you look at that. You know, not only is the subway system back to where it was in the 70s, now New York City is carrying such a debt load, they can't do anything about it. If they try to, you know, take on debt to fix these problems, it's at a higher rate, which is going to drive taxes even higher, right? So we're backed into corners in all these ways. I mean, it's got to be, you know, it's not like it's a square we're backed into 4 corners. It's more like we're backed into 8 or 10.
And I don't know who termed this idea, but I think it fits to what you're saying. That is this idea of suicidal empathy. We're so empathetic, like, oh, you know, this poor guy, and he doesn't have the money for the bus ride because he's got to feed his family, so he's jumping a turnstile, smoking a joint with a Glock down his waistband. Like, what? You know, so we're being so empathetic toward these marginalized communities or the criminals or whatever you want to call them, the, you know, illegal immigrants, that we destroy everything. And it truly is suicidal empathy.
I love that term.
Yeah. And TC says, to Will's point, if the government abdicates its responsibility to provide protection within society, it creates a vacuum. People will fill that vacuum. And this is how you get vigilantes and warlords. I tell you also, it is the rise of private contractors, because Albuquerque is nothing if not awash in private security contractors. They are, you can't swing a dead cat without, like, in front of the Walmart, you know, there's 2 or 3 security giant black Suburbans with dudes all over the place with guns, because the cops can't be there. They're not coming.
Yeah.
So if you want the security, you're just throwing your tax money away, because you're not getting the security service. You're going to pay out of pocket for that.
Yep. And that drives up the cost for that business. Right. And then they raise their prices, because businesses, as I've said before, in my opinion, businesses just filter money. They don't make money. They bring in a certain amount of revenue. Some goes here and some goes there. They filter it out to different places, and a little bit's left over. And that's just the way it is. So in the end, the customer pays for everything, including terrorists.
Yeah.
Which we'll get to later. So
interesting.
What's Will have to say?
He said the U.S. Constitution is a double-edged sword. It protects us and them and can condemn us and them. And Guile says that long 2 years to get it back, and my planet gun most likely goes sayonara if involved in a defensive shooting. Yeah, I was surprised. She had her lawyer, and they got, anyway, she was explaining how she got it back. But, you know, I could just see the, you know, just having the conversation with her and looking around where she lived. I'm like, man, you live in hell. I would not anything.
Well, a couple of points here real quick. You were talking about how, you know, they jumped the turnstile because they don't have money, but they got, you know, a joint and a Glock. And, you know, having some folks I know that are sadly part of that whole demographic, you know, there's never enough money for kids' shoes or whatever, but there's always enough money for cigarettes, dope, and tattoos.
Always.
Yes.
Always.
So it's a matter of priorities and, grow up.
Yeah. Tony says SCOTUS has ruled that law enforcement has no duty to protect its citizens. Yeah, we've
Yes.
covered that extensively in the last 11 years. American Warrior Society. There's at least 4 precedents there. I think one of them is Gonzalez. I can't I can't remember all of them, but yeah. Don't have no duty to protect you, brother. It's on you.
Yep. And also to Will Parker's point here about the Constitution protecting us and them and condemning us and them. Speaking just for me, it feels a whole lot like there's a whole lot of them being protected and us not being.
Well, that's where the pendulum seems to be swinging.
Yeah, and that's where the frustration comes from, is they can do whatever they want, but if a good upstanding citizen protects themselves, then they drop the hammer on that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's a source of frustration.
100%.
So all right. I found this one interesting because I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with it. We're not going to dive deeply into this. So Trump came out and said, yeah, those drones over New Jersey that we were all talking about for a while, those are all FAA approved. Well, A, why didn't the Biden administration just come out and say that? And B, what are they doing?
All right.
So it makes me wonder, is there and I'm just making stuff up here, guys, just supposing, is there like some big drone swarm tactic that they're perfecting and wanted to test in real world? And honestly, if that was the case, why not do it in the daytime and where nobody could see them for the most part? Obviously, they're visible, but they'd be high enough, whatever, I don't know. Or were they looking for something? Were there sensors on those drones because there was some sort of a threat? Same way the helicopters were flying over DC looking for nuclear signatures prior to the inauguration, right? Were they looking for something? I don't know. Be something on page 12 of your local newspaper when the truth comes out, if it does.
I think it's probably a confluence of a lot of different things. It is some drones. It is hobbyists. It's commercial drone piloting, and some misidentification, and potentially some UAP scattered in.
Could be. Yeah, could well be. So just throwing that out there for everybody. This one, I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to make this one into a big deal, but it's a bend back to our preparedness, which is kind of where we started all this at, Rich. Mm-hmm. New Orleans, they got a winter storm. They got some snow. Matter of fact, there's parts of Florida that have gotten more snow this winter than Wisconsin.
Damn.
So, yeah. In fact, some of my buddies were like, we should load the sleds up real quick, take the snowmobiles down to Florida because you can tell the grandkids about no kidding snowmobiling in Florida. It'd be kind of funny to get down there and be like, hey, where are the snowmobile trails at? But so they had some, when it got cold in New Orleans, some water lines froze and broke, and they built all these water towers, I presume after Katrina, to keep pressure up. Bottom line was, the towers ran out of water. They went into it was a 1-day boil water advisory, not end of the world, not Katrina level stuff. But the point is, guys, make sure you got stuff available. Purify water, heat the water, because let's say you were someplace where the electricity went out at the same time. Well, your gas stove still isn't going to work if you don't have electricity because it's electronically controlled, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just a reminder, always have those other, have a couple of cases of water in the house. You can sneak by for a day with a couple of cases of water, depending on how many people you have in your household, right? So, just a reminder. We should probably bend back around to some preparedness stuff here at some point, brother. But
yeah, good point.
Just to point out that we can't let our guard down.
Amen.
So, all right, tariffs.
I was looking forward to this part.
All right.
Eliminations on tariffs.
Yes. So really mean this to be, I didn't bother putting news stories up here on this because nobody really knows where it's going to go yet. It's all speculation. So initial stock market reaction, market's down today, not as much as I thought it would be. I didn't look in the last couple minutes, but I was looking earlier, and S&P's down less than a full point. Maybe that was the Dow. I can't remember. NASDAQ's down like 1.5 points. No, what it was, the futures were down like 3%. So
Mm.
it's less now. The futures are always more volatile. Isn't as widely traded. Hedge funds are hugely short the market right now, according to Goldman Sachs. They're expecting a big drawdown here at some point. Now, hedge funds aren't always right. Matter of fact, they're quite often wrong. Some of them take huge risks to get those big returns that they like to brag about. They also lose a lot of money too on those things. So doesn't mean they're right just because they're taking those risks. So if this, let's just say the tariff sticks at 25% and it sticks for a long time, it is going to hurt. It's going to hurt stocks. Okay. So this is the deeper part I want to get into, Rich, is we've talked about during the 90s and 2000s, we exported our inflation because we printed excess money and then we use that to buy mainly, we'll just generically say Chinese goods. So we exported our excess dollars and that exported our inflation. And that showed up in trade deficit numbers, right? So does this mean we're going to import inflation now? Because now prices are going to go higher. And let's just say China starts paying their 10% tariff. And let's just say this isn't how it really works, but it makes it simpler to model out. The Chinese government pays that 10% tariff. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, that's bringing dollars back here into the United States, right? So if that money in a perfect world, and this isn't how it works, just a visualization, if that money goes straight to the national deficit and pays that off, well, that would be a good thing, right? But we know that's not how it really works. It's going to raise prices for us, the consumers, okay? But if it raises prices to us, the consumers, and if, again, not how it really works, but if that were to go to pay off the national debt, is that a good investment for the future of the country? One could argue it is, right? It's going to cause a lot of pain in the meantime, right?
Yeah.
But if that's how it actually worked, then that could be a good thing. Now, let's just, in the perfect world scenario, again, let's say you pay 10% across the board more for your goods, but your income tax goes down 10% because it's going there, right? Net, we're the same for money, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to happen because there's no way they're going to get, it's just, there's too many what ifs inside of there, right? But these are big picture scenarios that are being thrown around out there, right? And there's a lot of people saying, well, put enough tariffs on there and then get rid of the income tax. You show me when government's gotten rid of a tax, right?
Fair enough.
I mean, right. So in a perfect world, yes, good luck getting that through Congress. Right. So
I think that, you're absolutely right. I mean, people think inflation, the true term inflation comes from inflation of dollars. So when those dollars come home, you're going to have an inflation. Would it be great if they get funneled directly into paying off that? Will that happen? No. So will we have inflation? I don't see a way around it.
I don't either.
Term or long term. Is it transitory inflation?
Well, depends how long you think transitory lasts. Apparently, Jerome Powell thinks it's about 5 years now.
Yeah.
So
it's generational transitory inflation.
Exactly. If you look at it over the span of 50,000 years, it's transitory. So what's Mark said there?
He says, hello, gentlemen. We had tariffs in Australia for a long time. What we noticed was poor development of local products as they were not directly competing with the imported German cars, for example. Great point.
Interesting. Yeah. So,
and Ted says tariffs cannot replace income taxes, need to be 120% or more across the board.
Yep. It's going to be really, I mean, replacing the income tax is pretty much a Facebook meme pipe dream, in my opinion. Not going to happen. Put aside just the math side of it is one side. And then of course there's the whole get it past public opinion, oh, these rich people already don't pay enough in taxes. Now you're going to make them pay zero while I pay. Yeah, it's just not going to happen, in my opinion. So the middle point here on this slide, what must occur to keep a lid on inflation? Now, notice I didn't say keep inflation zero, just keep a lid on it. Rebuilding our industrial base. because if we rebuild the industrial base, just like in the 80s when the Japanese car manufacturers moved plants here to the United States to keep away from the tariffs that Reagan put on them, that helped them be competitive. So, rebuilding that industrial base here in the United States. Now,
it changed so much too. I mean, the Toyota Way is a great book to look at this, how Detroit and the whole American auto manufacturing, the idea of Lean Six Sigma, which if Michael Gentile is still on, he is the guru at, but the idea of Kaizen and doing things the right way with manufacturing processes. So we benefited a great deal from that in ways that are almost hard to quantify.
Well, and also let's look at, there's a reason Toyota and the other Japanese car manufacturers were so successful. It's because the American car manufacturers let themselves slip into building really a pretty crappy product.
It's like Mark said. Mark is saying the same damn thing.
So,
human nature, man.
Competition is a good thing over time. It hurts in the short run many times, right? So if we want to rebuild an industrial base, there's a few things. A, it takes time. B, it takes a educated workforce, right? Because we're past the days that the guy puts the same lug nut on the same car for 30 years and has a pension. No, we're talking automation, robotics. It's a different game now, right? And if this is going to happen in any sort of timely fashion, we also got to reduce regulation. Because you can't take 10 years doing the environmental study to take 2 years to build a car plant.
Thank you. Exactly.
Right? So this all dovetails together. And this is, it's going to be tough to make all this happen.
The EPA, and I forget who it is, Will, but they said, what new regulations are you putting in? He said, none. I'm not putting in a single one.
Yeah.
Well, thank God, man.
Yeah.
Normally they come in, I've got reams of paper. We need to save this spotted owl. There are two of them and they don't like each other and they're not going to mate, but we're going to spend $1 billion trying to get them to screw each other. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. So somewhere on my computer, I've got somebody actually printed off the laws that were passed in a session of Congress and the regulations that came from it. The laws were like this, and the regulations that came from it were like 4 feet high. And of course, every time those new regulations come out, everybody has to dig in there. How does it affect my industry? How are we going to comply with this? And that really favors big businesses because they can afford to dig in and do all that, which is on a side note, why I think you see so many big businesses leaning to the left because they can protect their businesses through lawfare because it's so hard for a small firm to handle all that regulatory burden. Does that make sense? So you get somebody like a Microsoft, like a Google. Yes, I'm all for these regulations. Well, yeah, because the $1 million a year they're going to spend complying with that is such a small portion of their revenue. But for a small firm, if they have to spend $50,000 complying with it, well, that eats up all their profit.
Oh yeah.
So and that is a very definite strategy used by large businesses, which is made for a weird. You would think large businesses, traditionally would be more Republican, but if you look across the board, they're definitely more Democratic leaning. And so it's become this weird analogy to the military industrial complex. It's like the big corporation Democrat complex, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. Will has a great point here. He says, look at how long it took to build the Pentagon. Within 6 months of breaking ground, some offices were being moved into to conduct business. How long would it take now? And I tell you, General Groves, the Manhattan Project, the Pentagon, all this military infrastructure in the United States. Yeah, he saw no frontline combat, but I tell you what, that guy, his face needs to be on Mount Rushmore. Love him or hate him. General Grove, what he was able to do is absolutely mind-boggling. Could it get done now?
It would take, especially that close to the Potomac River. Oh my gosh, you have to do studies about the runoff from the construction site, and I'm all for a clean environment. I'm an outdoorsman. I love to go out in the woods, and I want those things to be preserved, but there's a balance, right? So, And back to our rebuilding the industrial base stuff, the political left will try to win in court what they didn't win in the election.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be things like everything from birthright citizenship to these tariffs to you name it, whatever Trump tries to do, they're going to try and win it in court what they couldn't win in the election.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and that's happening all over the place. That actually got, I didn't come up with that line. That came out of Europe, actually. There was a discussion about that in Europe. Demographics are going to play into this. You know, are we going to have enough people to fund this industrial base? Well, if we don't, then we need immigration, right? In which case, then we've got to reform the immigration system to make that work, because it takes too darn long to get through that system. What, 7 years seems to be the number I see a lot out there to become a citizen. No, it should be more like, let's measure that in months, right? But if we don't have enough people, even with robotics and all that running these plants, you still need enough people to run all those things, fix those things, right? So, and drive the trucks back and forth. You know, you can AI it to death, but AI isn't going to drive the truck that's hauling the cars from the plant to the dealership.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know. It will someday.
Well, it will someday, but it's not going to be anytime in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And AI is going to be a player in this, and also automation. All right. And you got to have a workforce out there that can do those things. You know, my youngest wants to be a mechanical engineer. He's obviously a lot smarter than me. Okay.
Thank God for your wife.
Yes, no doubt. In fact, he's been having fun. On a total side note, he's been having fun with a 3D printer. He made this for me for my toolbox up in the garage. I've named the garage Garage Mahal.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So he made this for me for my keep pens and Sharpies and stuff in up there in the garage. So but all this is going to play into it. But we've got a huge shortage of engineers out there. Well, somebody's going to design all this automation, right? And I mean, I was amazed the opportunities out there. I mean, most everybody in engineering school, by the time they're done with their junior year, they're already hired.
Right.
You know, so this plays into it, right? J-Dog's going to be a player in this. If inflation takes up, what's he going to do?
Right.
He's going to raise interest rates. Well, that's a new twist in it, right? So you could end up with Jerome Powell and the Fed raising rates during a time of tariffs. Well, that's a double whammy, right? So you've got opposing forces within the system that are going to work against each other here, each doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Right. It's just like the inputs on the collision avoidance system you're talking about.
Yeah.
One saying angle down, one saying angle up.
Yeah. And so you've got Trump doing what he's supposed to be doing. I'm saying that from the standpoint of he made a campaign promise and now he's carrying through on it. Right. And you've got Jerome Powell and the Fed going, hey, inflation's going up. We're going to raise rates. That's going to put the squeeze on people. Their prices are higher and interest rates are going up. It's going to squeeze on there. Please note, I forgot to take the please note out of this slide. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. All right. So drum roll, please. And the next slide. All right. So here's the perfect world outcome. This is not going to happen. Okay. But this is just a way to visualize this. Okay. Tariffs repatriate dollars that were printed back in the 90s and 2000s to use to stimulate our economy and use to fund globalization. Because that's why globalization worked, guys. A, our Navy guaranteed safe passage for cargo ships. And B, we printed enough dollars to fill the whole world up with US dollars. And we exported that inflation. Okay. So we start to repatriate those dollars. Those dollars are used to pay down the national debt. Again, like we're talking about, isn't actually going to happen. This is the perfect world. Okay. The reduction in debt equals more stability, because right now our debt's becoming very difficult to service. Third highest thing on the budget, right? Past the DOD now. That'll lower interest rates. Because remember, I think it was under Obama. It was under Obama. Our credit rating actually was taken down a notch by S&P and Moody's, right? So if we pay down our debt, just like a person, if we pay down our debt, we're going to pay less interest, right? So that lowers interest rates. Lower interest rates equals a stronger consumer and a stronger government because they're paying less interest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Easier to service the national debt. Easier to service the debt equals more people invest in the US because they see us growing and be able to invest more of our national money into, say, infrastructure, whether that be bigger roads to handle all this new industrial production, whatever it might be, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem will be Trump or whoever is in office, if this plays out, is there's humans. You think the government's going to see a whole bunch of, if it's not going to play out this way, guys, but let's say the government saw a whole bunch of tariff money roll in. You think there might be something to spend that on other than the national debt?
Yeah, but I gotta say, Doge. I'm
Mhm.
hoping is a check against that one. And number two, I wonder how this bounces up against modern monetary theory in the sense that money has to be pulled out of the system somewhere, which is what
Yeah.
currently our taxation does. It pulls the excess money out of the system.
Yeah.
So where is that money getting pulled out? I don't hear it in this scenario.
Yep, it's not.
Hmm.
So, and this is where some people, good friends I know on Facebook, are laying out. This is what's going to happen, and I'm like, yeah, that's a really cool little dream you got written up there. It's kind of like when Obamacare was going to lower everybody's prices. Okay, right? It's just as honestly, it's just as ridiculous because the government's involved. They're running off to Dr. Fuller's point earlier. They run off their own set of incentives, right? So this perfect world outcome is not going to happen. Now, might we get, I don't know, pick your number, 30% of this, 40%, 28 and a quarter. I don't know. Right. Maybe. So, it's tough to say, but this is not what's going to shake out exactly. And there's going to be a lot of volatility. Going back to our stock market stuff, expect a lot of volatility. Right now, today, the market's down. Let me just pull up the current numbers here. The Dow's down 1.3%. S&P's down 1.7%, and NASDAQ's down 2%, which honestly isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. But then tomorrow they come out and go, we've struck this deal, and it could reverse all this and be back where it was within a day, a week, 3 weeks. So if you're in the market, expect volatility. So if you've got a set it and forget it type portfolio, I would just turn off the news and not even pay any attention to it.
Not financial advice.
Not financial advice.
What are you doing? Are you long in cash right now? Or no?
I am fairly fully invested because I really do think this is just a blurb. So today's not going to be a good day for me. But I'm probably running kind of a cookie cutter right now. I'm probably running about 50-50 stocks and bonds right now. To that point, let's see what the overall bond market's doing here. Long-term treasuries are the price is up, which means rates are going down. Long-term is they're seeing this as a good thing for national debt. I'm supposing that off the top of my head here. Hashtag not financial advice. One thing I'm fairly heavy in is Walmart. It's had a really good run here. If you go back to 2023, December of 23 to now, so basically 2 years, it's up 100%.
Wow.
Yeah. People are shopping down.
But how will the tariffs impact that if most of it's coming from China?
You'll pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. But how
so again, they just filter the money, right?
Yeah.
And as people get squeezed, I mean, I don't know where Target gets their stuff from. Probably, I think more Mexico actually. Well, that's a higher tariff than China.
There you go.
So here's pop quiz. What country wasn't listed in the tariffs that we've talked about some in the past? Because sometimes is what's missing is the most important, right?
Yeah.
And this one struck me as I read about all the tariffs.
I don't know.
Well, go to the next slide, brother.
Oh, let's see here.
I think it's the next one. Oh, actually, we're gonna we're going to take care of this one first. Sorry, I forgot about this one. So, as some of you know, my bride ran our business, Bridal Boutique, for a lot of years, 20 something years, which means she started when she was 9 because she's 29 now. And will be forever because we celebrate anniversaries of her 29th birthday. And she retired last March. So she spoke to a friend recently, who's a small wholesaler. Okay. In that business. Now, in the bridal business, in the past, everything's come out of China. That's where all the bridesmaids dresses, prom dresses, they're all made in China. Okay. This particular friend, being a smaller wholesaler, she's excited about the tariffs. She's ecstatic, as a matter of fact, because the tariffs do not apply to shipments valued under $300. This is according to her. Okay. So because she's almost all of her shipments are under the $600 limit, she won't be tariffed, but the bigger players are going to be tariffed. So here's another angle on the tariffs. Is it going to help the small business person? Now, I don't mean the small retail business, because when we had our business, we bought from some of those larger suppliers too. And here's the part of tariffs I haven't heard discussed out there. Let's say you've got, in this case, a bridal gown that these aren't real numbers. They're just easy to do the math on. Say the cost was $1,000 for the wholesaler. Well, they add on 10% of that for a Chinese tariff. That's $1,100 now. Well, then the wholesaler in the U.S., which is how that business works, they're going to add on their percent because they want to make a percentage. They don't look at dollar amounts, right? They want to make a percentage on that. So now it becomes exponential, right? So now their cost is $1,100. So let's say they mark that up. They were marking 1,000 up to 2,000. Now they're going to mark 1,100 up to 2,200. Now it hits the store, and retail standard is at least double wholesale price. So now the 2,200 becomes 4,400. So that extra $100 can become exponential across the board. Now, the other side of that is you can only charge what the consumer will bear. Somebody in there is going to have to take a hit if the consumer can't bear that. When Trump put tariffs in on China in his first term, almost all those tariffs were paid by the Chinese government. They actually did not change their prices of the goods being shipped out of China. Those businesses ate it, which basically means the Chinese government ate it. Now, is that going to happen again? I don't know. I would guess not as much, because Trump's tariffs last time did not come in right at the beginning of the term. So they might have just been running the clock out on him the first time around. Well, this time they got to run out basically 4 years. That's a long time to eat that when the Chinese economy is not doing well. Before it was doing very well. So there's a lot of stuff in here. So yeah. So it's a different game than the first time when the people who are saying, oh, last time tariffs didn't raise prices. Yeah, well, it's because the Chinese government literally ate the cost.
I don't see any reason why they wouldn't do the same again. Do you?
Eat the cost. They can't afford to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're having a hard time right now.
Okay.
So, all right. So to the question, who didn't get tariffed? India.
Wow. Okay.
India at all. Matter of fact, quite the opposite. India turned around and said, hey, thanks for not tariffing us. We're going to reduce tariffs on products coming into India from the United States.
And there's like 1.4 billion people, or some obscene number, in India.
Yep. Yep. And as a Wisconsin resident, one of the things they reduced tariffs on was Harley Davidsons. Was big motorcycles. So, and I'm just envisioning Indian men wearing leather, and it's just not really working for me. But so is this, now we know how the Indians and the Chinese are with each other, right? I think if you go to the next slide, I dig into this a little bit. Nope. Actually, yeah. So this is from the Times of India. Okay. These below here are my notes here. Demographics favor a long-term alliance with India instead of dancing with China, right? Like I say, 1.4 billion people in India. India is the China of 1992.
Yes.
Right? When it comes to demographics, they've got the working age population of the world right now.
Yes.
So what did Trump just do? hey, China, you're on your way out. We'll tariff you. India, no tariffs. So as an investor, that makes me go, where do I want to put my money? Well, right now, as of today, now granted, market's reacting to the news. Chinese
Well,
stocks really
if you
aren't
look
down
at
that bad.
the Peter Zihans of the world, if you look
Uh-huh.
at the India demographic belt curve, it looks like it should. It's just not China.
Yep.
So it's a smart play long term, probably.
Probably, yes. And so we're getting the twofer, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's helping India and hurting China. And we know how the Indians and the Chinese feel about each other too. So it's also setting up that split in the world because let's face it, we're already squaring up against China and Russia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Two very large countries, but now we're building an ally with the most populous nation in the world.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So hashtag not financial advice. INDA is the ticker for the ETF for the Indian stock market, and SMIN, Sierra Mike India November, is their small cap.
I might want to check into that.
Not financial advice. Take a look at it. It would be a long-term play. The ones I would consider not putting money into, again, not financial advice, Mexico and Canada. Matter of fact, let's take a look here. The US dollar was going up. Oh my goodness. US dollar was going up in pre-market trading. The Canadian dollar's value, stand by here while I play around with the computer. That's down over 1% today, which in currency world is a huge move.
Yeah.
So
I was just, as you were talking, I was looking at, I guess 40 or 50 minutes ago, Tony, there's a couple different questions coming in. I think that are really good, but
okay.
I guess 40 or 50 minutes ago, Trump took a call with Trudeau.
Mm-hmm.
I was just reading on Reuters or Al Jazeera, and it was basically like Canada's misunderstanding the plain text reading of the tariff. And it's like, as to the why behind the tariff, like, and I guess it's like, hey man, what do I need to do to get this off of me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, comply.
Well, suddenly they want to have discussions, not just orange man bad.
Exactly.
Now here's something else to think about on tariffs, guys. And this is something that I has bugged me for a long time. The United States is 4% of the world's population, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
And we produce about 25% of the world's GDP.
Mm-hmm.
And we have never overtly wielded that hammer. And that's what Trump's doing. He's saying you want to keep your economy afloat. You have to sell the United States. There's a cost to that now.
And there should always been a cost to that.
There should have been, but we pretty much gave it away, right? In the name of globalization.
Yeah.
And
which is a false god and always was a golden calf.
Absolutely. It was just a way for certain people, corporations, government types to enrich themselves.
Yeah.
That's all it ever was.
Dr. Fuller says, how does exploiting that national split impact the budding BRICS efforts? I think it drives a wedge into it.
Mm-hmm. Sure
does. Maybe
does.
Sound the death nail into this thing, which is...
It could well be. And to Tony's point, yes, India is part of BRICS. They are the eye. So now is this going to, like I say, drive that wedge? That could well be what Trump's trying to do. Because if you take India out of BRICS, now they've lost the population part of that. Right?
And Brazil would probably be well, I don't know. They're kind of lefty down there right now. We'll see. But
yeah.
Mark says, hi, Will. I don't hear anyone talking about China buying up all the commercial properties, farms, and rental properties. China is still hauling the money via rental income.
Yeah.
And certain governors, I think Sarah Huckabee Sanders did some of that in Arkansas. Did she not?
Yes, she did. Also internally in China, still having huge problems with real estate. That's a whole nother show. We could go on for an hour about how that is still imploding. We've been talking about that for 3 years since Evergrande.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That slow motion train wreck is still running, and it's slowly getting worse. Just like our housing crisis, it took a long time to play out. I thought it was going to go quicker. I think you thought it was going to go quicker. It hasn't, because they keep propping it up with printed money over there. And that's something I need to reset my time calibration on these things. So, and to that point, experience is the hardest kind of teacher. It gives you the test and then the lesson. And that's what, the markets keep giving us, government keeps giving us all these things. So, and that's why, the older I get, the more I listen to old people.
Yeah. They've seen cycles come and go.
Yep.
And I've said it before, if I was a president, I have a cabinet position, which is the national historian, and he would have a great team, and they would look at historical impacts, just like I think he's doing a good job of that with regard to William McKinley.
Mhm.
Now, may he misread some of the lessons of the McKinley presidency? Perhaps, but at least he's looking at it,
Yeah. Yep. For sure. And there's the point right there. At least he's looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Because American politicians do a terrible job of looking at history unless it happens to bolster their current argument.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, I am hopeful, for the Trump administration. And, we are seeing, across the board, I've got a lot of red here on my screen at the moment, with the exception of the US dollar is going up. For you and Rasmic, gold is up 1% today.
It's almost at 3,000.
Yep. And
which is crazy because let's pause right there.
Yeah.
Silver is still, I think the ask price was like this morning was like $31 an ounce for silver. And gold is at almost 2,900. Yeah. But why, when there's a gap there, and Rasmus may know it, there's a gap between the gold and the silver. When it gets way out of whack, there's something going on. So I don't know.
Well, and I am aware of the theory, I guess I'll call it, of what you're talking about, the gold silver differential. There's a real term for it, and I can't remember it. But bear in mind, also silver is an industrial metal. Yeah. Not just the precious metal side of it. Just silver's down 0.14% at the moment on the spot market, while gold is up essentially 1%. But bear in mind, gold is also a fear hedge. Exactly. We looked at that chart a while back during the housing crisis where gold went up, I think it was 200 and something percent. Yeah. While the market was down 50% ish. Yeah. So I'm riding a little overweight in gold at the moment, because of the volatility, because every time there's some volatility, gold's going to go up because it's going to be a flight to safety. And I think that's what we're seeing with bonds today as well. Yeah. So now I'm just looking at the stock prices on two stocks here and supposing on this, and this is Walmart is down 0.07% on the day. Target's down 3.89. So call it basically flat, and Target's down 4%. Well,
that's exactly what we were just talking about.
Yeah. So people are going to, if people are going to get squeezed by tariffs, they're going to shop down.
Yeah, exactly.
And just out of curiosity, Dollar Tree down huge on the day. Give me a second here. I'll get you the exact number. Dollar Tree's down also 4% on the day. But where do you suppose all their stuff comes from? China. So, and they're price constrained by the name, right? We know it's not truly the dollar store anymore. It's really the Five Below, right? But they're going to get squeezed because their margins are so tight. Walmart, and let's bear in mind, what does Walmart sell more of than Chinese goods? Groceries.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They're the largest grocery store chain in the country by far. They crush Kroger, Albertsons, all of them. They crush all of them. So, and then while people are there, they're like, well, let's go and, Junior needs a new t-shirt or whatever.
All right.
So my guess is that's why Walmart is essentially flat today. So
we'll see how it ends up. But I mean, obviously this is the opening salvos of what could be a very long slog.
Yeah. And it's a lot of things are going to play into it. What happens with Russia, Ukraine, China, Russia. Are we able to drive that wedge into BRICS? That will take months, if not years, to play out. So, if you're investing in the market and you're worried today, I mean, not financial advice, but I'd just check out.
Turn the TV off.
Yeah, seriously. I mean,
hide your smartphone.
The Cartoon Network, better known as CNBC, is going to, they're going to be all over the place on this stuff, but
Mhm.
this is going to shake out. And
Yeah.
I think it's going to shake out in our favor in the long run, but it's going to be volatile in the meantime. I would expect between now and say fall time to be quite volatile in the market,
Mhm.
you know. And let's face it, we just had 2 back-to-back 20% plus years. I
Yeah.
mean, the conventional wisdom is the market takes a breather after that, but I dug in did a bunch of research, and it's only happened 5 times in history that we had back-to-back 20% up years. The average for the third year is up 12%.
Really.
Yeah. But there's going to be a pullback in here someplace. And what it does, it could be kind of violent too, because people are expecting a pullback. So when it
Mhm.
starts, if people start bailing out, that could drive it as well.
Yeah. Well,
Or
speaking
not.
of bailing out, Will, thank you for another outstanding show. I know we went a little long, but man, I tell you what, the analysis and the points you brought out were outstanding today,
Oh,
brother.
thank you. Very kind of you to say, sir. So,
And whenever you're ready, please.
all right, guys, the fight's coming. Be ready.